Hello, viewers and readers and listeners. This is Culturally Just Deconstructed, or Culture Deconstructed. And I've got Djene Bajalan and Stefan Bertram-Lee, my co-hosts, as always. I'm in the middle, but watch this. Look at this. I can move around.
You can move around, but...
So we're going to be playing Minecraft in this? No. What we're going to be talking about Isaac Asimov's Foundation books, and then also, more importantly, the TV show on Apple TV. How many people even have Apple TV?
All the people.
I don't know what it is. Is it something that comes with an Apple TV, or is it?
So it's a subscription service, but the reason I have Apple TV is because Sarah bought an Apple telephone, and one of the perks of buying an Apple telephone is that they will give you a subscription for a year. So I think they're trying to get people into the subscription service. They do some original TV. They had a Jason Momoa TV show and things like that. I mean, I don't know how successful all these streaming services are ultimately going to be because, there's a massive inflation of them. And, we can't spend all our money on different streaming services. But Apple seems to be quite I think they have a not too insignificant audience because, there's a lot of people who have Apple products around the world.
I'm interested to know about your wife's phone, the Apple phone. Is that like the Apple Watch?
It's like the iPhone. Is it called the
iPhone?
It's
the iPhone. The iPhone. Okay. I thought maybe
it's not like a rotary phone.
Yeah,
no, it's not.
I thought they might have because you're not supposed to call it the iWatch. It's the Apple Watch, right? But it's now this, and you're calling your iPhone an Apple phone.
Well, I mean,
getting the branding all mixed up here.
It's a product of Apple.
Sponsored by Apple.
It's an iPhone.
Brought to you by Apple TV.
Apple TV, yeah.
You know what? They actually have TVs that are Apple TVs. You get smart TVs that are Apple TVs. And I think there are maybe 100 people who own those devices.
But they are wealthy people.
$3,000.
Yeah. So, well, I I'm excited to know there's another streaming service. I think that to start with, I'll tell you the streaming services that I currently have. Not by any desire of my own, but I have HBO streaming thing, the HBO Watch, HBO, whatever. I have that. I have a Disney Plus against my will. It came with a Baby Yoda doll, which was given to me, and
it came with your children.
No, it came through my children. They bought it behind my back despite my explicit orders not to. And then they gave me a T-shirt, which you've seen probably, that has a Mickey Mouse ears and says "Dad" on it. That came with the Disney Plus, and then a plush Baby Yoda, which I tried to hang from the ceiling fan with a noose, but was taken down and saved. I have Netflix. I have Hulu.
Mm-hmm.
I have that's
Amazon
it. I think
Prime.
I have.
Do you have Amazon Prime?
I have Amazon Prime.
Yeah, don't forget that one.
Yeah.
I
don't have any groceries. I have no groceries in the house at the moment, but I have all those things.
The only subscription service I have is to my trade union.
Oh.
There you go.
Well, that's good. That's a little virtue signaling there. And what about you, Djene? What do you have other than Apple TV?
I have pretty much the same as you. We have Apple TV. We have Netflix. I have my parents' Netflix. I have my in-laws' Hulu. I have my own Amazon Prime. And then I did pay for Paramount so I could watch the terrible Star Trek reboot, which makes...
Is that Peacock? No.
No. Paramount is Paramount. You can get it through Amazon Prime. It's like this ridiculous system where you go to Amazon Prime, you pay for Amazon Prime, but then if you like, you can actually pay for another service or another TV channel inside Amazon. Do
you want to pay do you want to make $2.50?
I'm always down to make $2.50. What do we do?
If this account isn't linked to your Amazon Prime email address, you can then go on the Amazon Prime and subscribe to yourself on Twitch and make yourself $2.50.
Oh,
there you go. Yeah, everybody who has Amazon Prime has a free subscription service. Has a free subscription to a Twitch channel. So
and every month, but they can't just resubscribe to. Yeah, I mean they can resubscribe to Doug every month, actually.
Cool. Well,
we can't do any of that before.
Oh wait, we've got one viewer right now.
Whoa, shit!
Hello.
Who's the viewer?
I can't. Is there a way for me to tell?
Well,
I'm going to say it's Bob. Hello, Bob.
If they give a comment, you can.
Oh yeah.
Let's
see.
You can put it up on the screen.
So there's a chat overlay here. All right. Hello.
Partnership status.
So this is, again, just for the one viewer that's there, this is Culture Deconstructed from Diet Soap Media. You probably know Diet Soap Media, not at all, but we're the people who Djene and I used to be at Zero Books. I'll say that. And now we're starting our own company. We're going to be on Twitch. We're going to be on YouTube. We're eventually going to be on Broadway in a big.
Are we going to be on Odyssey though? That's the key question. Are we going to be on Odyssey?
Yeah, we'll be on Odyssey.
We'll quietly have a TikTok affiliate, which you don't talk about too much.
Oh yeah, we're going to have a TikTok. I'm going to be a thirst trap on TikTok.
You'll be doing like this.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's exciting. So you guys watched Foundation, whereas I skimmed the Wikipedia entry about Foundation.
Doug struggled with technology and the internet.
I did. I tried to.
Which is very sci-fi.
Yeah, that's true. It is a very sci-fi thing. I know a little bit about Isaac Asimov. I actually have one of his history books right to my left here. He's a massively prolific author. Written a lot of novels, but also a lot of nonfiction.
It's really remarkable when you look at his oeuvre, like his, whether or not we agree that the quality of all his work is up to snuff. The guy was, as you say, super prolific and produced on a lot of different topics. He was certainly a talented individual. And I believe, the Foundation won the award for the greatest sort of fantasy sci-fi of all time in the 60s. So, and of course, the Foundation was based on his reading of Roman history and specifically the rise and fall of Rome by Gibbons, which was a sort of classic of the era. So the guy was well read, clearly a talented individual. And I mean, I don't know what Stefan thinks of this. I think although his writing today is a little bit dated, he clearly had some kind of literary talent.
Well, the interesting thing is that kind of Foundation, when you think back on it or when you're reading it kind of quickly and not thinking too much about the actual kind of sentences or what you just read on that page, it's very interesting. Once you get invested into each one of the crises, it's very interesting. But when you're first starting out, you've on the new crisis and you have all these new kind of characters and you're not really invested in what's happening, you're a bit like, wow, this is like a series of conversations between nerds who are all men.
Yeah,
there are no women in this thing at all.
There's in the TV series. There's a female character, right?
There's a lot of women, but that was all. They're all men in the show.
Okay.
There are some women in the books. I forget, when they have the mule.
In the prequel books, there's quite a few female characters, which might be him writing it later, being realized women exist. He has a wife, the main guy.
Yeah, so the books he writes as
52 just left a comment saying, "Hello from Moscow, a sad semi-periphery of the world system that can't accept it yet."
Nice.
Hello
Enjoy
from Portland, Oregon, the United States, soon to be periphery country in the world system, and we are beginning to accept our fate.
Are we though? But I would definitely say, as Stefan points out, it is definitely not a character-driven, or at least the first books, which I think were originally short stories published in a kind of at a separate time. They were serialized, serialized short stories. They're not character-driven. The characters are very straightforward, and they don't have any emotional depth. And I think to modern readers, that's probably a little bit off-putting because, we're so used to like these deep character arcs, character drama, and things like that. But on the flip side, it really puts the focus, as Stefan says, on the kind of broader world historic events that are taking place. So it's a kind of approach that is like dated, but I still think it's interesting and worth reading. So long as you can get around that kind of weird style, which just feels really dated. I think, like there's some interesting sort of conceptions and ideas in the book, especially as Stefan says, noted around this concept of crises. So perhaps Stefan, you can like kind of outline the broad points about Foundation for people who haven't read it.
So I guess Foundation is kind of based on this whole idea of psychohistory, which is the kind of, ridiculous idea, I think, which you can use math and not kind of like math with like kind of insane supercomputers, but like the kind of math that you can do with the kind of machinery that Asimov was familiar with at the time and like kind of keen human minds. You can predict the future. But this is made slightly less ridiculous by this filtering system of crises, where basically they kind of reset the entropy of these predictions by forcing the colonies they have through these certain crises, which only have one possible move you can do in them, and there's only one possible outcome, which then it lets you kind of, once that's been reset to a particular point, and then you go on and kind of the extrinsic forces are more predictable, or there's like you can basically predict from square one again,
right?
Which makes this a bit less ridiculous.
And the kind of context of it is you have this galactic empire that is in decline. It's a kind of analogy for the Roman Empire. It's a highly centralized imperial sort of system. And Harry Seldon, the prophet of psychohistory, this mathematician, it's like maths, but he's basically an oracle, right? Sets up the Foundation as a methodology to shape the future, because he's like, okay, psychohistory predicts the collapse of the empire, and it's going to lead to thousands of years of barbarism. But because we know this, we can kind of shape this and shorten the amount of time that like humanity is subject to this kind of barbarous, dark age. And the Foundation is basically the story of the Foundation, which is the institution which Seldon sets up in order to shepherd this, as Stefan said, provoking these crises, which, then allow, like a next step in shortening the dark ages of humanity. And, obviously this is a kind of very influential idea. Like you see echoes of it in Dune with, the notion of the oracular spice and, seeing the future. Psychohistory is a kind of similar iteration of that, except, you have mathematics serving as the MacGuffin to sort of drive forward the narrative. But yeah, it's very much a story of these crises. I think I haven't read the prequels, but I've read the sequels that he wrote, I think in the 80s. They're very much more, the characters are still a bit basic, but, they're very much more like traditional character stories. Like he's clearly like learned, but like, I think there is something kind of interesting and quaint about the way that the original Foundation novels are, in the sense that they really are like kind of sci-fi in the sense of exploring an idea more than creating a compelling narrative.
Yeah, what comes first is psychohistory and the idea of psychohistory, and then everything else is written around that just to kind of produce. So that, especially I remember when I was reading it, he puts like encyclopedia articles from this fake encyclopedia at the start of everything, and you're like, I think Asimov would have preferred to just write the encyclopedia, like to write a history book in this imaginary universe, to write the encyclopedia, as opposed to having to actually tell this narrative. But, I'm not saying it's really terrible. Obviously, he pulled it off. It's one of the most famous things ever. And now it has a TV show.
Yeah.
I was going to say to the disappearing Doug, his role, I think, here will be for all the people that haven't watched the TV series or read the books or watching or listening to this eventually, and be like, what the fuck? That doesn't make any sense. Explain.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'll do here. And also I'm going to see if I can get dumped during the podcast. That is my goal. So in the first one of these cultural deconstructed shows, at the very end, I got a text from a woman who had met someone else and wanted to be exclusive with them, and she let me know quite nicely in a text right at the end. I just now got a text from a woman who I have not yet dated, but who I've met on Tinder, asking me questions about my life. So I went away to text back. You know, I'm in that little dance with this.
You're calling it kind of culture deconstructed, but it's going to end up being a TFW series.
It really will.
That is true.
Do you want to start with the TV show then? Because this is probably the thing that Doug will be able to comment on this, and we'll get out of the way and so on, and also specifically with the kind of technical aspects. I wanted to start with the visuals. So the visuals were cool, and I obviously understand there's a lot less money here, but with all the visuals, like, this is cool, but having seen the Djene movie, I'm like, this is a less cool Djene.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, you know, Denis Villeneuve is also like a very talented director, and I think he's one of the most talented sci-fi directors of our generation. So, you know, if Villeneuve was doing The Foundation, even with less money, I think he would do a better job. But it's competent. The special effects are good. I like some of the aesthetics. I mean, we discussed this off air, that you felt that it did not line up with your imagination of what the Foundation universe looked like. I would say, like, so it's very Romanesque. There's like, especially when you see Trantor, which is the imperial capital, it's like, it's very heavily influenced by, I would say, you know, Roman design. And
the thing might have just been me missing the Romanness of the books rather than the TV show moving anything. It might just be me missing something.
Yeah, because I did not feel too disappointed with the way that it looked. I was actually very disappointed with the way that the Foundation was portrayed in it, right? As this kind of frontier settlement. Because in my mind, when I read the book, so just so people know, according to the books, Harry Seldon is basically, okay, I'm going to get like politically ousted because the Empire doesn't like the fact that I'm predicting the collapse. So he convinces the Emperor to let him create an encyclopedia to save all humanity's knowledge. And this is like a cover for him to set up the Foundation as a political institution that can shepherd humanity through the Dark Ages. And for 50 years, the people who are involved in the encyclopedia basically have no idea that they're actually part of this long-term plan. And one of the things that I would say for the aesthetic of the Foundation, in the TV series, it was portrayed as this kind of frontier town, whereas when I imagined it in the book, I imagined it as a kind of university campus, but like in the middle of nowhere, you know, like.
Well, I think I kind of imagined it as both things at once. And I think that was one of the main things in the Foundation at the start, that you kind of feel like it's this frontier town, or like a series of frontier towns, and then there's just kind of one massive gleaming tower in the middle, you know? That there's kind of both at the same time. There's kind of like these nerds very focused on producing an encyclopedia, which turns out to be not what they're meant to be doing at all. And then you kind of have this frontier town. But in the TV series, there isn't, you don't really feel this hard distinction between... What was that saying back? Do you still say in Oxford, town, like town and...
Town and gown. Town and gown.
Yeah, town and gown. There doesn't really feel to be in the TV show like a town and gown distinction.
I definitely agree with that. I imagined it as like one of these like liberal arts campuses in like a small town in the middle of like South Dakota, where there's like nothing around it. It's like all nature, but you have this like, you know, fancy fancy campus surrounded by like you said, like a town. But yeah, they very much sort of played it up as this frontier town. So that didn't sort of chime with my feelings about like how it looked. Whereas I think Trantor and the way that the Empire was portrayed, I guess like I read the copy of Dune I have has, the copy of Foundation I had has an introduction about the context in which Foundation was written. So I was kind of primed when they mentioned like it was based on Gibbons' Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. So I kind of always envisaged it as a kind of Romanesque civilization. So, it probably wasn't exactly what I imagined when I read the books, but it was not like, it didn't jar with me when I read the books. Whereas when I did see the way that they portrayed the Foundation, it just seemed a little bit weird. I think
another problem there was to do with budget. So when those barbarian kingdom people come to attack, it's that classic thing that you have in TV where, the heroes are getting attacked by the villains and there's 4 or 5 heroes with guns. And on the other side, there's like 26 guys. And that's it. And you're like, damn, this is the fight for the galaxy. If these 5 guys lose to these 26 guys, the galaxy's over. And you're a bit like, what are those 5 guys going to do anyway?
Scale is always the problem with these TV adaptations. I mean, I don't know if you, it was probably before your time, but did you ever watch Sharp's Rifles with Sean Bean?
Actually, I saw a bit of it on TV. It was on the same channel that I watched Stargate SG-1, I think. But
there you go. So Sharp's Rifles was a Napoleonic War British TV show with Sean Bean, and it had like excellent production values, but they obviously couldn't really get the scale of the battles. So it'd be like the Battle of Waterloo, but it's like 20 people in a field shooting muskets at each other. So
the classic thing about Stargate SG-1 is they traveled to another planet, and seemingly all these planets just had one village on them. And once you solve the problems of that one village, you solve the problems of the planet.
And it's the same with Star Trek as well. I would not say Foundation was sort of that extreme. I think there was scale with it.
Like Trantor worked, I think.
Trantor worked. Like it looked good. The scale was good.
That was Foundation by showing only the palace most of the time, which obviously you don't expect there to be very many people in the world.
Yeah, like so the palace, the palace was quite good, and that sort of gave that gave scale because the palace, because you got glimpses off the outside of Trantor, and it was just enough to give you a good sense that this was a big, huge planet. And I also thought the religion planet, I forget what the name of the religion planet, where they had like the space pope. Right. So they have they have like a space pope section that was also quite good. So the galaxy didn't feel tiny, but and I think Trantor was done particularly well. But yeah, it's a TV show. I guess their budget is not as big, and I guess also it comes down to like direction and scale. So generally, the way that it looked was good.
So the other kind of main thing that people have talked about with the Foundation TV show, apart from kind of what's actually going in it, is that what's going on in it is very different to what's in the books.
Yeah.
As we've mentioned before, there's women in the TV show, something that Asimov didn't think of. And also, I think everything in the TV show is very dramatized. Mm-hmm. I was thinking especially of the scene where the old emperor goes to visit that priest. They're having a conversation, and literally like the rocks are falling in the building. And it's like, right. Is this necessary? Can't they, like, dramatic conversations can be dramatic just because they're dramatic. You don't have to have like rocks falling and like everything having to be on such a constant knife edge of like an actual collapse at all times,
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a bit much melodrama.
Can I ask you guys a question that comes to my mind as I listen to you discuss a show that I haven't seen, but which I'm nonetheless going to participate in discussing. I've noticed that in some of my favorite science fiction programs, there's been a shift in tone. I'm thinking about Star Trek primarily.
Discovery.
Yeah, Discovery. Yeah, I mean, over time, there's been, and then Picard, I guess, is the other series that there was a kind of optimistic quality to Star Trek that has been lost in the reboots. And I'm wondering if Foundation is also kind of a dark version or a corrupted version of what Asimov might have originally been thinking about, or if the kind of optimism of early science fiction is lost.
The TV show hasn't really gone on long enough to see, because I think the thing in Foundation books by Amazon,
by Apple, by the iPhone,
sponsored by Apple TV, is that it's kind of, the idea is that fall of any large organization or large social structure is inevitable at some point. But to the actions of human beings, we can do things to soften this fall, and we can make the thing that comes next better. But the TV show is not at a point. We're still at the collapse stage, so it's unsure. And obviously, the collapse has been more dramatized. Like in the first episode, I think, in the first episode, there's on the planet Trantor, everyone lives under the surface, and so the only way to see the sky is to go up a space elevator. And in the very first episode of the TV show, that space elevator collapses and falls on Trantor, and 100 million people are killed. And this is what prompts the Foundation to go into exile. But in the books, that doesn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, and also they kind of tie, like, the fall of the space elevator, which is not in the books, is tied to the two barbarian kingdoms, which are in the, well, one of them is in the books. I can't remember both.
There's more of them in the books in total, but I don't know if they're the same names.
Yeah, they have barbarian kingdoms, but like the barbarian kingdoms are bombarded by the Empire, so there's a lot more violence in it. But Asimov is still kind of negative. It's still kind of a fall in the books as well. The story.
I don't know if it was planetary exterminatuses in the...
No, there was not planetary exterminatus in the books, because the story also, like the story in the TV show, begins at a different point from the books, right? Yeah. Like the books are all blended together to create this narrative, whereas if you were following strictly in the order that these books were published, it starts off with the Foundation 50 years after its foundation, and sort of goes from there, following each of the crises, which kind of through these crises, the Foundation evolves. The first crisis, the Foundation basically creates a balance of power between the various barbarian kingdoms on the edge of civilization, and uses technology, but technology disguised as religion, as a methodology to control these barbarian kingdoms. Then the next, they have the trade, like the rogue traders, which sort of go out there and like engage in capitalism. I can't remember what the third crisis is. I totally don't remember what the third.
No, the first crisis is resolving the things to the barbarian kingdoms. The second one is beating the barbarian kingdoms, because the Foundation had become priests of their society. When the barbarian soldiers were ordered to fire on their priests, they refused. And then the third crisis is cucking the further barbarians of capitalism.
Yeah. So you have these crises which the Foundation goes. But in the TV show, we're getting kind of bit of the prequel novels, and we're getting a completely like there's a storyline in it which revolves around the Emperor and the genetic dynasty. This notion that they have a dynasty that rules the Empire, and in order to maintain stability, it is a clone of Cleon the First, and so they always have these clones to provide like a continuity within the Empire. And there's a whole kind of storyline about how this is kind of promoting stagnation, and people are against that. That's actually if you ask me, that is the most interesting thing about the TV show.
I was going to say that the Emperor is like a cool addition, and it's. Yeah. In my notes, I'd written 3 emperors, cool. Are they asexual? And then as I continue to watch on, apparently not.
No, they're not asexual. They basically have sex with women, and then the women have their minds wiped.
Right?
Well, why is that necessary? What are they doing? That seems a little extreme. I would say that's a very bad date where at the end of it you have
Well,
to...
I think it's to
wipe
promote
them.
like no attachment on the emperor's behalf.
Right. Yeah. So that they can,
Oh, I see.
so it's
Wouldn't
basically
it be better for the emperor to have the memories of these women wiped rather than the other way around?
the emperor.
He has to do shit that day. They can't just zap him at the end of the day because he needs to remember tax bollocks.
And
Yeah,
also that
you can go in. I've seen Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. You can go in and systematically just erase one person. Uh-oh, I froze Stefan. But there you're back. Well, my other question is, what about just the look and the feel of the show? Is it gritty? Is it dark? Is it all in dark rooms? Is there any like clean, well-lit spaces in the
It's
show?
quite well lit. There are dark rooms. Overall, it's not like a horrible grey, everything's dark, you can't see shit kind of thing. It's a mix. I think it's a good mix.
Yeah, it's not overly. It's not like Star Trek Discovery where everything is like has to be like super dark and then there's a lens flare and it's just like it's just all a big Debbie Downer. Yeah, but one of the things I would say is like some of the choices that they made in changing the main storyline were, let's say, problematic to me. So, people get triggered a lot about like, oh, they changed the men to a black woman, right? Like that seems to be a trend where they're like, they're bringing more black women to play leading roles in like science fiction and things like that, which is fine. They did a gender swap in Dune with Leah Kynes. They made Leah Kynes a black woman. They have a black female captain in Discovery. That's
I would think that something like this would be it wouldn't be a problem because the characters in Foundation aren't iconic.
Yeah, it's exactly this. So it's not, that is like people, I think some reactionary elements on the internet are getting mad. They're like, oh, they're making it all black women. It's like the characters are not very deep. So like casting a black woman in the place of what we assume was a white man, although it's not always apparent in the Foundation novels because the descriptions are a little bit sparse from time to time. Like they're missing, the problem is actually some of the like functional changes, like Salvor Harding, who is the leader of, who becomes the leader of the Foundation, is a man in the novels, is a woman in the TV series. But what I found problematic about what they changed was not the identity of the person, but rather the function. Whereas like Salvor Harding was a kind of bureaucrat and a non-violent bureaucrat who, used like diplomacy and intelligence to play different sides off each other to like keep the balance of power between the Foundation and the barbarian kingdoms around them. So it was it was nerds doing nerd politics and avoiding violence, right? Whereas in the TV show, they make Salvor Harding like a military figure and who does like commando raids and things like that, which, it's very American in a kind of way. It's like we have to make the main character like a kick-ass fucking warrior. When instead, what I thought was like interesting about like the first Foundation short story was that this guy is like dealing with like the bureaucracy of the encyclopedists and at the same time is trying to play off these like very dangerous barbarian kingdoms who are basically threatening to do violence to the Foundation. And it's like an example of like diplomacy. So I did not like that change to the storyline because it felt like, again, like this like pervasive militarism in American culture where like, like to be a hero, you have to be like a fucking kick-ass person. You can't be like a nerd who uses nerd powers to avoid bloodshed.
I resent your anti-American spirit and you're chalking that up to America per se, even though it's true. I still resent it. As the one American here. Yeah. So it sounds like it would be worth watching despite the fact that they do the pretty typical thing of trying to sex it up with violence and
yeah, sex it up with sex too. There's some sex.
Yeah, I was going to say like, so they added women in, which obviously means they've added romance in, which whatever. I skipped through the kissing scenes, but whatever. My problem with it was they found the need to add pregnancy. Like that became, for whatever reason, like a major thing, pregnancy. women getting pregnant. Like the first woman gets pregnant in the second episode or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I found, really quite silly, because also with the Emperor stuff, and it turns out the woman she has a baby is like important. So like two characters which in the books were disconnected by any kind of blood or whatever, in the books are now mother and daughter. And with the kind of the genetic Emperor thing, they're emphasizing this whole blood thing. And so I think that's one way in which the TV series is clearly more reactionary, more feudalistic than the books, that they've reintroduced and really pushed this idea of significant blood,
Yeah, that's in Star Wars too. The reboots of the Star Wars trilogy.
Oh yeah, but like Star Wars is always like fantasy in space,
Yeah, but
yeah, I
don't remember the bloodline being certainly not in the first Star Wars movie, and even when you found out that Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father. I love talking about. This is me talking about
spoilers, man.
Stuff I know about Star Wars from the 70s and 80s. Even then, in the original trilogy, Princess Leia was a princess, but you didn't get the feeling that the reason they had force powers was precisely because of their royalty, or that the people who mattered were always
obviously Princess Leia doesn't have the force, right?
But she does. Well, but she doesn't develop it. I think that's the issue.
Does have it later on, like in the sequels, but also, they say at one point Yoda says to Obi-Wan, "Oh, well, if this doesn't work out with this jerk Luke, we can always go with his sister." I mean, he doesn't quite say that, but
it's I think Stefan hits on it, a very important thing. I think it's definitely has a more reactionary elan in that sense, because the whole psychohistory, when I read the novels, it felt like it was being portrayed as a science, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in the TV series, it's being presented far more as like quasi-religious, and the Foundation is portrayed far more like a cult rather than like in the novels. I didn't get the sense that it was a cult. I got the sense that it was a university doing a project, right? Whereas in I could understand why they made that decision, but I think it takes away something, because Dune is very much like a spiritual story. That's like, it's not a problem. And there's like religious themes. I just finished God Emperor of Dune, which is like all about, like these like quasi-religious themes and what it is to be a god. But like Asimov as a kind of like New Deal liberal / like Asimov was very much a New Deal liberal and a believer in science and progress in a kind of positivist sense. Like, Frank Herbert was like a skeptic of all those things, right? Yeah. And so like it makes sense Herbert Dune. Herbert Dune, yeah. Herbert Dune was a skeptic of all those things. But Asimov's thing is like psychohistory is not a spiritual thing. It's like it's a scientific breakthrough that like allows humanity to navigate its future. And religion is portrayed as merely a political tool. Like, so in the first crisis, they managed to like con the barbarian kingdoms that are basically losing technology into worshiping their engineers, who are basically basically the Foundation doesn't believe it's all magic, but they teach.
They have a school where they teach the kind of the barbarians how to upkeep their
ships.
Before we get too far from what you just said, though, Gene, I want to say I appreciate your use of the word Elan. That was very, very nice.
And actually, I don't want to go off topic too, because what I wanted to say was another thing which is different, and I think for the worst, is in the books. Not only is there not kind of like a magic like a special magic black girl on Terminus, the guy, which I forget the name of, the mathematician, deliberately makes it so that everyone on the Terminus can't be as smart as him, doesn't have the capacities that he has, that basically they're stupid, because that prevents them from fucking up the plan. Because anyone that understands the plan, that knows too much about it, will, through knowing about it, inevitably fuck it up. So he deliberately makes sure that none of the nerds in charge are math nerds that can actually understand his plan. While in the TV series, they're clearly setting it up so Salvor Harding can understand the plan. While in the books, he does everything to make sure he doesn't understand it because he knows if he does know any part of the future, he'll fuck it up.
Yeah, because there's two foundations in the Foundation. And like the first foundation is like the technical people, but there's no psychohistory people, like deliberately so. The psychohistory people are all at another place with their secret foundation, which is doing other things. But yeah, definitely there is like some, it reminds me a little bit of what they did with the 1984 Dune movie, where, they it's like they almost completely like misunderstood the message of the novel and like wrote something with the opposite message. So the 1984 Dune movie was like literally about a prophet rather than someone being built up to be a prophet. And I think this foundation, it's mysticizing what is like deliberately supposed to be a scientific innovation explicitly.
Maybe it's all part of the plan.
Maybe. But
the other thing I wanted to say was, how they call the Emperor Empire, as if he embodies the Empire himself in its totality? It obviously, the only one this is going to be comprehensible to is Djene, but it really reminded me of saying Serokati. Instead of saying Sorok, like the word for leadership, as if in himself he embodies leadership or like the leadership. Yeah, I just find that interesting.
Yeah, like it becomes like it's depersonalized. It becomes like it's like a deliberate attempt to institutionalize it. Yeah, I mean, and that empire, like, I kind of feel that they could have not done the Foundation. They could have got rid of the whole Foundation thing and just done their own original science fiction IP.
About the emperors.
About the emperors and it would have been really good because the acting... And the robot, the robot
lady, she's sick.
Yeah, the robot lady.
And she looks a lot like the mother in Dune too. So it was all like I just constantly had my Dune on my mind.
I mean, it's like it's hard not to like because these series have come out so close together. It's like hard not to compare them, right? Even though like their format is extremely different. But yeah, I found myself getting frustrated with the TV show. Because there were parts that I thought were excellent, that I thought were like really smart. And the irony was those parts that were so good were generally like nothing to do with the Foundation storyline. And when they kind of ham-boned the Foundation stuff into it, it kind of like they turned it into like a psychodrama, a mother and daughter drama, like a personal drama, all these kind of things which just seem to go against the message of the message of the Foundation. And this is the problem with like US TV shows some of the time. There is a time and a place for like psychodramas and things like that. But, this is how they fucked up Game of Thrones because they transformed like a story which was about people being in situations which they like can't really shape because they're like these huge impersonal forces that are forcing them to act in a way that they might not otherwise want to act and turn it into like, is Jon Snow going to have sex with his like sister? And it was
his
aunt. Yeah, sorry, his aunt. And I just feel like American TV showrunners, even when they hit on something good, they don't trust their audience enough. Mm-hmm. They're like, no, the audience needs to have a love story, otherwise they're not going to identify with the character or like, it just seems, like...
This whole conversation is really making me look forward to when we talk about Wheel of Time.
I'm looking forward to...
Are we going to talk about Wheel of Time next? Is that the next thing on the agenda?
Yeah.
I would like to select something eventually, and we had a conversation on Facebook earlier, Stefan, that made me feel as though I would never be able to pick out anything because I wanted to talk about Idaho Transfer, and that apparently that's dated. You're saying that a movie that came out in 1973 is not going to feed the algorithm. No one's going to care. But
the thing is, we need to get through all of... There's dozens of people that are massive fans of Idaho Transfer.
I would
What
say
we
there are
need to do,
dozens,
we need
dozens of
to-
people
we
who
need-
know about it. I don't think there's any massive fans of it, but there's dozens of people who know
We need
about
to
it.
get through all of the big TV shows, and then there'll obviously be fallow periods where there aren't any TV shows that have recently come out, and then we can do fucking Stargate SG-1, we can do Ida,
Babylon 5.
Babylon 5. Just do random bits on. Well, also the other thing we can do is we can alternate if there aren't TV shows coming out. We can alternate between like an relatively obscure thing, and then do something which is enormous even when it doesn't have something coming out, like Star Wars or Star Trek. People will always watch Star Trek and Star Wars regardless of what time of year you put it out.
We should definitely
what
talk
about stuff that's not sci-fi, like Seinfeld? You know, that's on Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, we fucking good. Yeah, I don't mind. I've not seen it, but yeah, like we can do whatever.
But we should definitely, I think we do need to like follow this up with a talk about Star Trek, especially the way that the new Trek is going, because like there is a culture war taking place over that new Star Trek. And I think there's a lot of disingenuous stuff. Like if you get called, like, if you don't like the new Star Trek, you're just like anti-woman. It's like, no, like it's not the reason that the new Star Trek is problematic.
Isn't that old though? I mean, Discovery, the culture war over Discovery is like what, 3-4 years old now, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, it's still going on.
Really?
There's a very funny thing going on in the Wheel of Time community, where the anti-show people have made their own kind of subreddit on Reddit called White Cloaks, which are basically in the books are like the bumbling, idiotic villains, and they've like deliberately named themselves at this, which is just it's really funny and great.
But with the rise of like reactionary cultural commentary, which is massive, right? Like reactionary cultural commentary is like a huge industry on the internet. People
like fucking balding nerds that are fat and just do like an 8-hour episode about why Star Trek is too gay, and then they get like 8 million views.
Yeah,
I would
like
say all the cultural commentary in America around popular culture is reactionary on all sides. They're all fucking reactionary.
Culture deconstructed. Subscribe.
Yeah, us. We are not reactionaries. I may be clueless often enough, but I'm not a reactionary.
It's not what Twitter says.
To talk about Foundation in general, to go away from the TV show and talk about the Foundation in the books in general, I think another thing which Asimov went wrong in, which I mentioned before we came online, was not dreaming big enough with kind of the population of what the galaxy should be. They had a silly figure for what the population of Trantor and the Galactic Empire is, which was it was like 8 trillion, which should mean there's probably like a few million on each of the planets they have. But I found out actually in the books, it's the same. Like Trantor's meant to be like a city planet with like 100 levels below the surface, and it has a population of 40 billion, which you could probably fit like in one massive urban area in like the northeastern United States or something like this.
Yeah, this is like the scale problem. I think often is the mistake with science fiction. For example, the Warhammer 40,000 universe, which people often like go, oh, Warhammer is a rip-off of Dune, but it's just as much a rip-off of Foundation. You know, the Warhammer universe was created in the 80s. And, the touchstones for like sci-fi nerds in the 80s were still Foundation and Dune. But, it always makes me giggle that like when they created the Warhammer 40,000 universe, they were like the super elite Warhammer Space Marines things. There's like only 1 million of them in this like galaxy spanning. It's like there would need to be more than 1 million.
There's like 0.001 of them for each planet.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, so like they like Games Workshop has increasingly got better in its like lore of like creating scale, but they just can't get around like that fuck up at the beginning where they totally messed up the number of Space Marines that needed to exist to enforce the Emperor's will across the galaxy. So scale is always a kind of problem. Dune does it okay because like we don't really get given facts or numbers. We just get kind of an impression of things and occasionally a hint of how bloody a campaign was during the Great Jihad.
They bring up Hitler.
They bring
to mention like, oh, fucking pussy numbers compared to us.
Yeah, exactly. So they Dune's better. And also, like, I think another thing is that Dune is like does not feel as dated as Foundation, because Dune gets around the technology question by saying like, oh, they had computers, but they got rid of them, and then we created this new civilization based on a whole different set of technology, a wholly different technological base that is based around the spice melange, and humans like mentats and humans forcing themselves to evolve. So although it's very alien, it's like it feels plausible as a future. Whereas in the Foundation, Asimov is talking about nuclear power and like the technology he's talking about is like very like 1950s. It feels like
during the third crisis, there's a bit where a guy goes down to the surface of a planet and tells them about all the amazing things that space capitalism can get them if they just open up their economy. And he promises like all these kind of amazing things, and then one of them is a washer dryer which will fit in one room. And you're like, come on, Asimov. People like they must have just been making those like on planet Earth while you were writing this. You weren't writing that long ago. Like, okay, maybe it was like 10 years after you were writing, but surely you should have been able to see that kind of productive capacity.
When was the book written?
In the 40s. The first short stories are written in the 1940s. So yeah, like, and it's stuff like, I mean, I may be paraphrasing. It's like, and then he held him up with his nuclear ray gun, and it just sounds like, well, like it sounds very retro sci-fi.
People like there'll be a guy 2 meters away and he'll shoot him with his nuclear gun, and they'll both, the other guy will die and he'll be fine. And it's like, how the fuck does that work?
And the like the basis of power in this Dune civilization, in the Foundation civilization, is nuclear power, right? The power of the future. So Foundation definitely feels more dated because of the way that technology is portrayed, whereas Dune like has kind of sidestepped that issue by basically by like having this like completely different type of technological civilization. And I think, the kind of dated nature of some sci-fi is just like if you read the Neuromancer, like it feels very dated,
That's with like kind of early internet stuff, right?
Yeah, it's like cyberpunk. It's like cyberpunk stuff. And
it's where the word cyberpunk comes from.
Yeah, it's where and it's like, because I remember I read it not so long ago, after I finished my doctoral work, like while I was doing my doctoral work, I was like, I can't read fiction. I have to like just read obscure books on Ottoman history. But when it finished, I was like, I'm going to hit all those sci-fi classics that I never got a chance to do. So I read The Neuromancer, and I just remember reading, they have a whole section of The Neuromancer where it takes place in Istanbul, right? But it's like, it's cyberpunk Istanbul, but really the Istanbul being portrayed is like 1910s Istanbul, where it's like this cosmopolitan city with like an Armenian trader and things like that. It's like very,
they're all dead.
Yeah, they're all dead. They're all dead. They'd be definitely all dead by the, so like
1984.
Yes, the Neuromancer feels very like dated as well. And I didn't really like the Neuromancer that much. I mean, you can see how it's influenced writing like in a very fundamental way about the future, but like, yeah, it's one of these things where it's like, I think its success is partly because of its literary merit, but also partly because it was like one of the first books to come up with that idea. It's like Lord of the Rings. Like, I don't rate Lord of the Rings as a book. I think it's a little bit of a snooze. But, at the time, it was all you had, right? All you had was Lord of the Rings. Now you have much better fantasy that obviously builds on that. So, I think...
Well, I mean, William Gibson and yeah, I mean, the thing about comparing Asimov to William Gibson is that, I mean, it's a worthwhile comparison to make, because in between Asimov and Gibson, there was a new wave movement of science fiction where there was a pessimistic turn in science fiction. There were there was an introduction of other values, literary values, and overall, like a kind of a new left sensibility infused into the world of science fiction through, anthologies like Dangerous Visions and Harlan Ellison's work, but also a lot of British writers. And then Cyberpunk came after that, like taking the pessimism of the new wave sort of for granted, but trying to bring an adventure rebelliousness, adventure story kind of rebelliousness into the genre again. And but like William Gibson and Asimov are still, I think, diametrically kind of opposed types in terms of writing. So, if you like the Foundation books and you don't like Gibson, it may not just be down to him getting Istanbul wrong, but it may be you like this optimistic golden age of science fiction vision, and you don't like the pessimistic and individualistic new left kind of turn.
Maybe that's the case. Like another series I really liked was the Mars trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson, which is kind of an optimistic look at the future. And I think obviously science fiction goes through phases in terms of the way that it, like the way that it kind of like the disposition it has. And I think, like in recent years, I think we've gone a little bit too far to the like negative, it's all doom and gloom version of science fiction. And I think there is some utility to having science fiction as like a genre where we can actually imagine a better world. Like when I look, like something Sarah always says to me is like, I want to go into space when it's like Star Trek technology. And I'm like, why? She goes like, because it's good because they have carpets on the bridge of the right? Like I think the reason people like Star Trek still, like people still watch like The Next Generation, is because it like does present a kind of optimistic vision of the future, which there are things which are a little bit cringe today because, things have moved on since like 1987. But I think there is some value to the optimism of it. One of the best series of the new like wave of Star Trek, in my opinion, is Lower Decks, right? Which is the cartoon, because it's like very lighthearted and it's kind of like a positive like view of the future. Even when they're dealing with heavy things, like bad things are happening, they're like chipper and they're like, we can deal with this and things like that. And I think we live in an age where not to go back to our favorite Mark Fisher, but, we like can't imagine, like the end of capitalism, and everything is like kind of like viewed through that lens. And I think the science fiction that like is the most representative of that, for example, is something like The Expanse, where, The Expanse is a universe which is basically our universe, where we have a Cold War between military powers, and we have like evil corporations, and then we have like the Belters, who are like the oppressed third world, who are ready to do. I mean, it's explicit in the novels. They're like the Belters
integrated into the capitalist economy.
They're eventually integrated into the capitalist economy through some kind of grand bargain, and they explicitly says it. Like the character, the leader of the Belters, it's not in the TV show, but it's in the book. Says we are the heirs to the Afghans, right? We are the heirs to the Afghans, and things like that. So like The Expanse feels like, our imagination of the future is like, oh, it's just going to be like now, except like the productive force.
Slightly different places.
Yeah, like the Earth in The Expanse is basically, it's overpopulated and everybody has a UBI, but like life is shit if you live on the UBI, right? And then Mars is basically kind of like quasi-fascist, and the Belt is like the third world where everyone's like brutally oppressed by corporations. And there's rebels. And that's like very much like the kind of spirit of our age. If you go back to the 90s, like you had Star Trek The Next Generation, which was kind of positive, but you also had Babylon 5, which is very much like more conventionally like a liberal TV show. But like the kind of message of Babylon 5 is like, we may have this, it's like we're going to struggle against like the dark forces of totalitarianism, fascism. We're going to like strike out our own path. And by the end of Babylon 5, they're going to a brighter future. But, like that doesn't seem to be what people want these days. And, I think a science fiction that is going to like get out of the mold, especially on TV, is actually one that's going to be presenting optimistic picture of the future.
Yeah, I think you're right. Listen, guys, we've been recording for about an hour. I think that's, and I want to check my dating apps before I move on to more work. So I'm going to end our broadcast here, but we had one viewer the whole time. At one point we had two, for sure said howdy about an hour ago. And I enjoyed this. And next week I swear to God, I'll be prepared. I do want eventually to watch like Forbidden Planet and like old classic stuff that I've seen a dozen times so that I don't have to subject myself to Apple TV through my Apple phone.
We have to stream for 49 more hours.
Oh, we do? 49 more hours?
We will.